But I think Sean Payton's great coaching. And I think we had a tweet. I don't know, Foxy, if you pulled it or not, that had stats between basically what Taysom Hill has done these last few games, both rushing and passing. Yeah, so Taysom Hill's 3 starts. This is as of at Ross Dellinger. Rushing, 34 carries for 176 yards. Those are 5.1 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Passing, 54-76, 70% completion, 550 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, record 3-0. So those are some modest numbers in comparison to other starting quarterbacks when it comes to the passing, but the rushing is always good. They've won games. In this past week against the Falcons, let me tell you what I think happened with Taysom Hill and Sean Payton, and probably Drew Brees in the meetings as well. Last week, he looked terrible as a quarterback, right? They beat the Denver Broncos, they beat the Denver Broncos, but he didn't look like a good quarterback. It was one of those things where everybody was like, okay, the athlete playing quarterback isn't going to work anymore. People are going to start figuring it out. Defensive coordinators are going to start hunting Taysom Hill. They're going to know what packages to drop back into, keep Taysom Hill contained so he can't run, and it's going to be game, set, match for Sean Payton, New Orleans Saints, and Taysom Hill, even though Sean Payton is now 8.5-0 in the last 2 years without Drew Brees at quarterback, which includes Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, and now Taysom Hill. I think what happened this week in practice or in the film room, they had to show Taysom Hill from the first couple games he was playing quarterback where maybe he looked at somebody and he saw him and he didn't think they were open. So then he would go to the second one, then he would go to the third one, and then he would ultimately end up running, right? That's kind of how it would, that's how the whole thing would progress. And I think Sean Payton was getting to the point he was like, no, bud, listen, the plays are good, okay? The plays are good. This is open in the NFL. So this week, I think what you saw at Taysom Hill was he was pulling the trigger and he was throwing into tight coverage, and it was awesome. I mean, it felt like that could be a tough thing maybe to get over mentally, is if you see a DB sitting on a guy and in your entire life playing high school, college football, maybe even practice squad quarterback or in practice, like, okay, if that person's on that person is covered, I'm going to go to the next one. And then you see the same exact setup, you're like, And then Sean Payton and the boys had to be like, no, that's what we pay Michael Thomas for, by the way. Like, that's open for that guy. And in the NFL, that's open. So just go ahead and let it rip. If you get picked off or whatever, it happens. Just go for it. It felt like it was a much more free Taysom Hill whenever he was throwing, and it was awesome to see. And by the way, if this is the Taysom Hill going forward, the guy who can get to his drop step and deliver on time and throw into tight things, maybe he's 100% right with this being the future Steve Young of the New Orleans Saints. I think if you're a Saints fan and you watched Taysom Hill play yesterday, after the first 2 games, you're like, we're winning, okay, but this guy's good. We like him. He's got big legs. He's athletic and all this shit. But yesterday, I think, was the first time you watched and you're like, oh, yeah, this guy could be a quarterback in the NFL, because he was throwing into coverages where everywhere else you'd be covered. But instead, Michael Thomas is making plays. Kamara came back. It was like they were back to being that same old offense.
How much do you think it is him also just trusting himself to make that throw, too? Because, like, in Philadelphia, I think the situation, like, Carson Wentz has lost all trust in himself. Like, you'll see him get back there, and he'll kind of go to throw, but then he has no trust in himself to make that throw. So I don't know if that's, like, similar to maybe what Taysom, like, hey, trust yourself, man. Just make the throw.
Yeah, that's the mental hurdle, right? Pulling the trigger. You got to be able to pull the trigger. People sit on tweets, you know? People type up a tweet, put it in the draft section, never pull the trigger. You got to pull the trigger.
Let it rip.
I know. No problem.
It was against an Atlanta defense who they played 2 weeks ago as well. I think that's huge.
Yeah, well, for the Atlanta defense as well, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, for both sides, as everybody thinks, like, oh, the offense got a chance to see him, but Sean Payton knows that defense, right? Sean Payton knows that defense. That defense also got to see Taysom Hill, so maybe Sean Payton's in the Coach of the Year candidate as well. I would assume he has to be.